while, but the excitement is back. And now I'm in Arizona in the Arizona Psychedelics Conference. Just spent a wonderful day hanging out in Apache land yesterday. I confess a little bit distressed to see some people walking around with guns. I guess that's called the open carry gun state or something like that. I still have a hard time understanding the logistics behind this. But hey, we're far from guns, and we are talking about another kind of gun. We're talking about consciousness, and we're talking about freedom, and we're talking about liberty on another level, liberty to experience who we are, cognitive liberty, liberty to travel to other lands and come back and report on it and think about it and write about it and challenge things. So I'm here with a very inspiring speaker, Sean McAllister, that I just got to meet, and we're talking about participating and collaborating more closely in Chacruna. He's a lawyer, and he has been involved in several different initiatives in cannabis legalization in Denver, and also in the Psilocybin Initiative in Denver. So thanks for being here, Sean, and why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, Bia Labache, what a joy to be with you here in beautiful Arizona. If any place represents psychedelics, it's the multicolored sandstone topography of Arizona, the land of the Apache, the Navajo, the Hopi. I give much respect to this land, which is sacred and ancient. And it is our brothers and sisters from indigenous tribes and from all over the world that have led this psychedelic renaissance. And as I said a few minutes ago, lawyers are really translators of movements and translators of human desire into policy. And so it's been my great honor and privilege to work in the drug policy reform movement for 23 years now, starting in the mid-'90s when cannabis got legalized in California. Friends of mine began involved in the cannabis industry right at the beginning, and I went from being an environmental lawyer, which I wanted to protect the earth and protect the sacred land all around us, to realizing that drug policy is a major issue in the U.S. and around the world, and we have a moral obligation to be involved in this horribly dysfunctional system. And so I do bring great joy and exuberance to my work in drug policy reform because, frankly, I'm part of that intergenerational struggle to change hearts and minds and policy from a system that put people behind bars, from a system that didn't respect religious freedom and cognitive liberty, to a new system that looks at drug use as a public health problem. And so it's been a really inspiring journey for me for the last 23 years. And I think, we're winning. And we're winning on cannabis reform. We're starting to break ground on psilocybin reform. We're having this dialogue about ayahuasca, peyote, and other psychedelic drugs. And I have complete confidence that we are continuing to change the legal and policy world around these substances so that one day they will be legal and they will be accessible and people will benefit from this. This is all because we want our brothers and sisters to live a better life. We want them to be healthier. We want to be able to deal with the challenges of modern life in a better way. And we are being rewarded by, once we educate people, they understand and they help us make change, and eventually we get full legal change. So it's just an honor for me to be part of all this, and I'm happy to talk about some of these other topics in more depth. But I think we have to bring great joy to our work because we should be grateful for these challenges. Our challenges are great teachers. They show us who we are and the things we have to change. And so for that, I'm grateful for these challenges.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of optimism in a way, despite all the problems that we have in our topsy-turvy world, a new word that I just learned with you guys yesterday. I do agree that, coming from Denver and you opened your lecture giving salutations from a freedom state, it must feel good to see the movement happening over there, and the fact that the U.S. is the major lead on the drug war, and now you have, I guess, over 40 states that have some kind of legalization for marijuana. So I think we are facing a change and a wave of the tide is changing. But marijuana is a topic people know more about, so I wanted to focus a little bit on the Denver Psilocybin Initiative. Can you explain to us a little bit for lay public what is that initiative about?
Sure. Well, actually, I think it's important, to understand the lessons that we're taking from cannabis legalization and applying to psychedelic legalization. And so the Denver Psilocybin Initiative is actually essentially a copy of what we did with cannabis. We didn't start with cannabis by just fully legalizing at the state level. We went to local municipalities and said, how about this town say that they don't want to enforce against cannabis? And so in 2005, we passed a lowest law enforcement priority initiative in Denver to say that cannabis was not a priority of Denver police. And that was part of the dialogue that started the public education that culminated in a statewide initiative to fully legalize cannabis. So just like with that initiative, we're applying those lessons to psilocybin, and we're starting with an initiative in Denver to say that the enforcement of criminal penalties against people who possess psilocybin for personal possession should be the lowest law enforcement priority of the city of Denver. And beyond, we're going to I've been consulting with the campaign. I don't represent the campaign, but I've been talking to them and helping them craft a public presentation for this. So in addition to lowest law enforcement priority, it's also saying the city of Denver can spend no money on the enforcement of psilocybin laws in Denver. And that also is a lesson from cannabis legalization, where medical marijuana has existed because of federal laws that say the federal government can't spend money enforcing against cannabis. So you're seeing a lot of lessons from the cannabis legalization world being applied to psilocybin. Now, so in Denver, we did have a recent poll that showed, just without any public education or campaign, about 45% of people said they support psilocybin legalization. So we're not quite at the majority level yet, but I'm very encouraged by that number, that almost half of a initial survey, which was actually done by telephone. And when you do telephone surveys, you tend to get older people. So that might be encouraging, because even an older set of survey people said they would, almost half would legalize psilocybin. So I think it's critical, whether we win or not in Denver, that we need to have a 40 or 45% in favor number. And so that's why I'm committing resources and time to help this initiative, because if we have a very terrible result, 20% support, it could be very detrimental to the movement. And the Denver initiative is important. Some people have criticized it, but for all its flaws, we should try to help it and support it, because a win or a narrow loss would be very encouraging for the movement, but a terrible loss could be very discouraging.
Why have some people criticized it?
Well, I think that, the drug policy reform movement has largely been driven by large organizations like Drug Policy Alliance and Marijuana Policy Project and others with enormous funding and structure behind them. Those players are always wanting the perfect initiative. They're always wanting, a well-funded campaign. And the Denver initiative has been created by a former U.S. military officer who found a benefit in psilocybin, and he kind of went out and just gathered the signatures all by himself. So he's not been part of the traditional drug policy reform movement, and I think because of that, people have looked at him with skepticism. But now that it's on the ballot, it really doesn't matter anymore. Just like Richard Lee's attempt to legalize cannabis in 2010 in California, once it's on the ballot, we have a vested interest in being involved and helping it succeed.
So I guess that this kind of criticism is something along the lines, you don't have all your ducks aligned, or you don't have all your ducks together. You need to have money for lobbying and money for polling. But what you're saying is that, maybe that's right, but now we got it rolling, so let's make challenge an opportunity.
This is a huge opportunity. It would definitely be a message to the world if Denver legalized psilocybin this year. I mean, this would be a huge, noteworthy event. As I said in my talk earlier, if an individual community says we support cannabis or we support psilocybin, that makes the rest of the community think, wow, this could really happen. And I think we suffer in the psilocybin legalization movement from this sense that that's never going to happen. Nobody really believes that. And we need to have expressions of local support to show that it is possible and give people inspiration and hope. And that's what we're hoping to do in Denver this year.
So just for clarifying, in a lot of our audience, like myself, is not native speaker of English, what does it mean to be on the ballot? What does it technically mean? Are we already having an advance? Are we already conquering something because we are on the ballot?
Yes, it means there's the U.S. is interesting in that the Western U.S. has a process where citizens can actually change laws themselves. Most places you need the legislature or city council or your representatives to change the laws. But in many Western states, we have citizen-led initiatives to change the law. So that's what happened in Denver is this individual, Kevin Matthews, gathered 9,000 signatures from citizens of Denver, and he submitted the petition to the city. And once you have a certain number of authorized signatures from voters in Denver, they have to put this proposed change of the law on the ballot, which means there's an election to decide if this should become the new law of the land. So May 7th, we're going to have an election in Denver, and everyone will get a ballot who's a voter. And if enough people say, yes, we should legalize or decriminalize psilocybin, it will change the law. We don't, this is one of the problems with drug policy reform is that we cannot count on politicians to lead the way because they are scared of these issues and they don't want to take leadership. So the citizens have to take leadership. And this is why cannabis has been legalized across the West, because we have these citizen-led law changes, citizen-led initiatives, and the people can lead. We don't need politicians. We can do it ourselves. So that's what we're doing in Denver, and if it passes, it means it is the law of the city of Denver that the city cannot spend money enforcing psilocybin law. Okay,
gotcha. So I know that you have another side of yours that I don't know if you want to share with the public, but I guess you have some poetic vein in you, and I heard you did some kind of like personal song or tribute to your own story. Do you think you could share that with our audience in our dear live?
Maybe I'll pick it up maybe halfway through. Look, this is a reflection of art and music are integral with psychedelic therapies, with personal growth. And for me personally, there's always been a close connection and synergy between art and psychedelics and cannabis use. And so this kind of reflects where I was 10 or 15 years ago.
Just do it.
I will. And I have this really nice ayahuasca poem that I should read for you sometime that I wrote this summer, but I don't have it with me. So I used to talk about, marijuana is a law enforcement obsession. Every year, 750,000 people are arrested for simple possession, while 60,000 people sit in prison on marijuana violations only, and taxpayers are forced to spend billions on this puritanical baloney. Well, the only reason it ain't legal is because there's a whole lot of middle-class people that don't know how to tell the complicated truth to their kids, that drugs themselves are value neutral, you dig, like candy, sex, or TV. Of course, abuse is negativity, but there is something called positive and responsible use. It's called a safe environment, not endangering others, and not using drugs as some excuse to be a loser. But instead of the truth, parents support no-tolerance laws that criminalize youth. Rich people don't go to jail for drugs. They go to rehab, while poor people are pushed into prison and treated like crap. So yeah, I'm wondering when we're going to walk away free and reclaim our cognitive liberty or the right to choose our state of consciousness, knowing that when we do no harm to others, what's wrong with this? Right now, all they give us is cigarettes and beer, heart attack, lung disease, liver cancer, and fear. Well, I'm sick of the debating. Justice is tired of waiting. To be heard, defend the psilocybin. There you go.
Hey, yo, I'd hire this guy as my lawyer, wouldn't you? Come join our movement. Keep on tune. Blogging from the Arizona Psychedelic Conference. Big hug from Bia Lavachi and the Chacruna team. Keep on tune.